But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. Matthew 5:44. What you are about to hear is not easy for me to share. It's not a story of triumph without scars or faith without failure. This is a testimony of a man who walked into the darkest places he never imagined he'd go, driven by grief, rage, and a false sense of purpose, only to discover a light so powerful it redefined everything. This story isn't about perfection. It's about pain, conflict, and the radical force of forgiveness that changed me from the inside out. I'm not here to preach. I'm here to confess. Because someone, somewhere, might be standing on the edge I once stood on, and they need to know there's a way back. If you've ever questioned your path, if you've ever carried guilt so heavy it crushed your voice, or if you've ever believed you were too far gone to be saved, then I ask you to listen closely. My name is Elias, and this is my story. I was 21 when the ground beneath my beliefs collapsed, but if I trace it back, the seed was planted long before, on a dusty summer afternoon in a part of the city where silence was rare and pain hung in the air like smog. My city was bleeding. Protests, sirens, smoke, those were the sounds of our streets. And amid the chaos, my heart held one sound louder than all, the echo of my brother's laughter, now gone. It wasn't just a death, it was a theft. They didn't just kill him, they tore something out of me I never got back. I felt it physically, like a hole that widened every time I saw someone smile. In my head, I replayed the image. Him lying on the concrete, lifeless, blood turning dust into mud. That became the moment I stopped believing in peace. From that day forward, everything I did was shaped by grief disguised as justice. My brother's name was Khalid. He wasn't perfect, but he was mine. He was the only one who could pull a smile out of me when the world felt like fire. We grew up in a 2-room apartment with peeling walls and a window that barely closed, yet his laughter filled it like a cathedral. After he died? No, after they killed him near a church during what the news called a sectarian disagreement, our home turned into a tomb. My mother stopped humming. I stopped speaking. The silence screamed. Everyone around us kept moving, but I stayed stuck in that moment, that loss. I wanted someone to bleed for what we lost. That desire became my compass. I was no longer looking for meaning. I was hunting for someone to blame. They found me when I was at my lowest. The group called themselves the Shield of Truth, but what they offered wasn't truth. It was anger wrapped in righteousness. Their leader, Kamal, spoke like he knew my soul. He talked about betrayal, impurity, justice. But what drew me in wasn't his words. It was the fire in his eyes. He looked like a man who had already burned the world and was ready to burn it again. That fire called to mine. Our meetings were secret, our chants violent. We trained in silence and prepared in darkness. I wasn't scared. I felt powerful. My pain finally had a purpose, a weapon, a name, and I, Elias, was ready to use it. When they asked who would lead the next mission, my voice rose before my brain could catch up. I remember the night like a scar. We rode in silence toward a small village where a Coptic church stood. I was carrying gasoline and a blade. The plan was simple: ignite chaos, spread fear, avenge Khalid. When the flames rose against the night sky, I didn't feel regret. I felt relief. The screaming, I told myself it was justice. The crackling of wood and stained glass, it was a hymn for Khalid. I had convinced myself I was honoring him. But later that night, alone in my room, the fire inside me went out, and all that remained was smoke. My hands were still, but my stomach churned. That night marked the beginning of something I couldn't yet name. A fracture in my belief, a whisper that maybe I wasn't as right as I thought. Days turned to rituals. We trained harder, moved faster, plotted deeper. I became someone I didn't recognize, but I liked it. Or at least I told myself I did. Until the second raid. Another village. Another church. Another moment where I burst through a door expecting to find cowards or enemies, but instead found a family, huddled in a corner, arms wrapped around each other, praying. They didn't scream. They didn't fight. They just stayed close, their mouths moving in silence while flames danced outside. I froze, not because I was afraid of them, but because they weren't afraid of me. Their calm was unnatural, their peace, an accusation. I saw in them what I never had. Faith that didn't shout, didn't burn, didn't hate. It shook me. That night, I had the dream. A man in white, standing in darkness. His eyes weren't angry. They were heavy with sorrow. He didn't shout. He whispered my name. Elias, why do you persecute me? I woke up drenched in sweat, shaking, the words still ringing in my chest. I told myself it was stress, a trick of the mind. But the dream wouldn't leave me. It came again, and again. Each time the same question, the same sadness in his voice. I began to unravel. In meetings I was distracted. During training, I made mistakes. Kamal noticed. One night, he looked at me with those hawk-like eyes and said, "The heart of a distracted man is easy to cut." That was his warning. I nodded, pretended I was still with them, but I wasn't. I was somewhere else, still in that burning house, with that silent family, with that man in white. I found the Bible in a dusty corner shop, hidden behind old novels and magazines. I wasn't looking for it. I didn't even know what I was looking for. But when I saw it, something shifted. My hands trembled as I picked it up. I bought it with the last cash in my pocket and hid it under my shirt like a crime. That night I waited until the house was still. I pulled it out from under the mattress and opened it to the first page. Genesis. I read about a God who didn't destroy, but created. A God who didn't curse, but blessed. It was the opposite of everything I had come to believe. My hands shook as I turned the pages, my mind rebelling against every word. And yet, I kept reading. Something in me was changing. Slowly, quietly, but irreversibly. By day, I was still Elias the fighter. I nodded when expected, repeated the chants, carried the weapons. But by night, I was someone else entirely. I read in secret. I prayed in confusion. I wrestled with a storm of shame and awakening that clashed like thunder in my chest. Every verse I read felt like a dagger and a balm at the same time. And then came the crucifixion story. A man on a cross, nailed and dying, whispering words not of vengeance, but of mercy. "Father, forgive them." I read it again, 10 times, 100. Forgiveness? For murderers? For me? My hands trembled as tears fell on the pages. That moment shattered the illusion. I wasn't a warrior. I was a weapon of hate, and I was breaking apart. The guilt hit me like a flood. Memories I had buried clawed their way up. The faces of those who ran from the flames. The girl we dragged from her home, her eyes wide, her mouth praying. I had erased her then, told myself she was the enemy. But now, her face haunted me. I couldn't sleep. Food tasted like ash. My mother noticed. Her eyes followed me everywhere. Silent, full of sorrow. I avoided her gaze. I couldn't let her see what I had become, or what I was becoming. The double life was suffocating. Every day with the group felt like betrayal. Every night with the word felt like treason. I was a man torn between two fires, one that destroyed and one that purified. Kamal called another meeting. This one felt different, darker. His eyes gleamed with something cruel. He laid out a new plan, a raid on a Christian school. "Children," he said, "are seeds. If we burn the seeds, we stop the growth." I felt sick, physically. My stomach turned to stone. My hands went cold. I wanted to run, to scream, to punch him in the face. But I said nothing, because to speak out was to die. I knew what happened to traitors. He made examples of them. Their screams had echoed through the alleyways. But something in me snapped. I couldn't do it. I wouldn't. Not this. That night I packed my Bible, my few coins, and made a plan. I told Kamal I'd scout the school grounds. Alone. He nodded slowly, suspicious, but agreed. "One mistake," he said, "and your mother pays." I walked into the night not for reconnaissance, but for escape. Every shadow felt like death. Every echo like Kamal's breath on my neck. My feet moved on their own, driven by desperation and some deeper pull I didn't yet understand. I found a public phone. My hands shook as I dialed the only number I trusted. A friend from childhood, Amir. We hadn't spoken in years, not since his family left the faith and became outsiders. But I knew he'd help. I didn't even finish my sentence before he said, "Stay where you are." 20 minutes later, he pulled up, pulled me into his arms, and drove. We didn't speak. Words would have broken me, He took me to a hidden chapel, tucked beneath an old building. The scent of incense and stone hit me like memory. And then, I saw him, Father Samuel. I didn't speak. I couldn't. I collapsed. My knees hit the stone floor as all the weight came crashing down. Guilt, grief, horror. Everything I'd buried, everything I'd done. It poured out in sobs that ripped my throat raw. I confessed. Every fire, every scream, every lie. I begged for something. Punishment, maybe. But instead, he listened. When I finished, he placed a hand on my shoulder. God doesn't see a monster, he said. He sees a wounded son finding his way home. I cried again, harder this time. He offered me a choice. Not escape, not cleansing, but rebirth. That night in the glow of candlelight, I was baptized. As I went under, I felt the weight of 1,000 sins pressed down. When I rose, they weren't gone, but they weren't in control anymore. I wish I could say it got easier. It didn't. My mother wept when I returned home. My father threw me out. "You are no longer my son," he screamed. The door closed behind me like a coffin. I stood in the street, homeless, heartbroken, exiled. Amir found me again and gave me a small room, a thin mattress, and silence. The loneliness was brutal, worse than pain. But in the stillness, my faith took root. I read the word by day, and by night, I wrote. I poured out my story in notebooks until the pages blurred. Amir gave me an old laptop and showed me how to use encrypted forums. "Your voice can reach others like you," he said. I was terrified, but I began to write. Not sermons, not doctrine, just truth. My truth. Days passed, then weeks. I posted my testimony. I waited. Nothing. Then, one message. A boy from another city wrote, "I feel the same rage, but your words stopped me. I'm leaving the group." I wept, not from guilt, from joy. More messages followed. Names, stories, pain. Together we formed a hidden network. Men once full of hate, now searching for light. But with hope came danger. Kamal found out. He called my phone. "We'll find you," he said. "And when we do, I'll rip your eyes from your skull." The threat chilled my blood. But something else came too. A letter slipped under the door. It read, "I was the girl you dragged from the house. My name is Layla. I forgive you." I dropped to my knees. Forgiveness had a name, and that name saved my soul. Forgiveness from Layla shattered me in a way that nothing else could. It wasn't abstract anymore. It wasn't theological or symbolic. It was real. It came with a name, a face, a memory. She had every reason to hate me. I had burned her home. I had dragged her from safety. And yet she said, "I forgive you." I read those words over and over until the ink blurred through my tears. For years, I had convinced myself that I was too far gone, that men like me didn't get redemption, only judgment. But here it was. Not only grace from God, but mercy from a victim. That day, I didn't just weep. I changed. I knew then my life was no longer mine to waste. It had to mean something. It had to be used to build what I once destroyed. I poured myself into the secret network. Every night I was online talking with men like me, some younger, some older, each trapped in the same prison of hate. We didn't speak like preachers. We spoke like survivors. We talked about pain, about grief, about how easy it is to confuse vengeance with justice. I shared my story. I listened to theirs. And one by one, they started to wake up. The movement grew quietly, like seeds sprouting under concrete. But it was dangerous. Kamal's men were still out there, and they were hunting me. I lived in hiding, always moving, always cautious. Every knock on the door made my heart jump, but I kept going. Because every time someone messaged me saying, "You saved me," I remembered. Grace isn't safe, but it's worth it. Eventually, the pressure became too much. Amir pulled me aside one evening. His face was pale, serious. "They're getting close," he said. "It's time." He handed me a one-way ticket and a new identity. The network, with the help of friends overseas, had arranged my escape. I stared at the papers for a long time. Leaving felt like betrayal. Egypt was my home, even with its scars, even with the ghosts. But staying meant death, maybe worse. So I packed my few belongings. I kissed Amir on the forehead and whispered, Thank you for saving me. And then I left. I didn't cry until I saw the plane take off, the desert shrinking beneath me. That's when I realized I wasn't just fleeing danger. I was being exiled from the soil where Khalid was buried, from the parents who'd erased me, from the boy I used to be. I arrived in Spain in winter. The cold stunned me. The gray sky, the wet streets. It was all so foreign. I barely spoke the language. I knew no one. My apartment had white walls, no bars on the windows. The silence was deafening, but different. Not the silence of fear or secrecy. It was the silence of possibility. I began again. Slowly. I joined a small church. I volunteered. I cooked for the homeless. On Friday nights, we handed out soup and blankets to people sleeping in alleys. Every bowl I handed over felt like a small act of healing, like a tiny stone placed back into a broken wall. I wasn't trying to erase what I'd done. That's impossible. But I was building something new, something better, something rooted in the peace I once tried to burn. People asked me to share my story. At first, I refused. Shame still clung to me like smoke. But one day, I stood up in a small room behind a church and began to speak. My voice shook. I told them everything. The death of Khalid, the rage, the fires, the dream, the girl, the baptism, the rejection, the grace. When I finished, no one clapped. They cried. They hugged me. One woman said, "My brother is still in that darkness. Thank you for being proof that light can find him." That night, I didn't sleep. I just stared at the ceiling, overwhelmed by what had happened. I wasn't invisible anymore. I wasn't just a ghost riding in the dark. I had a voice, and people were listening. The past didn't go away. It never does. Some nights, I still wake up sweating, the smell of smoke vivid in my nose. Sometimes I see Khalid in dreams, smiling the way he used to. I think he'd be proud. I hope he would. I pray for my mother every day. I don't know where she is or what she believes, but I ask God to comfort her, to protect her, to one day let her see me again, not as the monster I became, but as the man I'm trying to be. I no longer seek justice for Khalid in the form of fire. I seek it in the form of life. Every man I pull back from the brink is a monument to my brother. Every act of mercy a eulogy for what we lost. It's not enough, but it's something. Now, I sit by the window in my small apartment. Rain taps against the glass. On the desk beside me is a Bible, a worn notebook, and 2 letters. One from Layla, the other from a man whose house I burned. He too forgave me. I don't know what tomorrow holds. Maybe I'll always live with shadows. But the silence that used to be hollow is now filled with a quiet song. A song of redemption. A song that doesn't erase the past, but gives it purpose. And it's my voice, singing it. After all this, I know one thing for certain. Grace didn't just find me. It made me new. If you've made it this far, then I want to speak to you. Not as a storyteller, but as someone who once believed he was beyond saving. If you carry pain that feels too heavy, if you've made choices you can't take back, if you've ever looked in the mirror and hated what you saw, I need you to know something. Redemption is real. Grace isn't a myth, and forgiveness isn't reserved for the few. It found me when I was at my lowest. It met me in my hatred, and it made me new. But it didn't happen in a single moment. It was a choice, a surrender, a willingness to let go of the fire and reach for the light. Maybe you're standing in that moment right now. Maybe you're still running. Maybe you've already fallen. You're not alone. There is a God who doesn't wait for perfection. He waits for openness, for brokenness, for the smallest whisper of, "Help me." If you're ready to take that step, I encourage you. Don't wait. Call out to him. Pick up a Bible, kneel where you are, or simply say his name, Jesus. This isn't just my story, it can be yours too. That's why I'm sharing it, not to glorify my past, but to point to the one who rewrote my future. If this message stirred something in you, don't let it end here. Subscribe to this channel and follow Jesus. That's not just a slogan, it's an invitation to begin a new life. A life rooted in peace, not punishment. In mercy, not rage. In truth, not fear. Turn on the notification bell, because this space isn't about content, it's about transformation. Here, we don't just tell stories, we build bridges. We light torches in dark places. And if this testimony reached you, I believe it's because you're meant to carry that light forward. Leave a comment below. Share where you're watching from, share your story, or simply say, I'm here. You're not invisible. You're seen, and your journey matters. And if you feel called to help us reach others who are still in darkness, click the join button next to subscribe. Your support isn't just financial, it's spiritual. It allows us to keep telling the stories that bring people back from the edge. I want to thank you, not just for listening, but for being present. You could have clicked away, you could have ignored this, but you stayed, and that tells me something. You're searching too. You're open, and that means you're already closer to the light than you realize. Until next time, I'll be here, telling stories, praying for you, walking this road of redemption one day at a time. I hope you'll walk it with me. With all my heart, thank you. Stay close, stay tender, stay open to grace. We'll see each other again soon.